Let's take a view of what we're doing today from about 30,000 feet and take a look at the whole picture and what we're going to be accomplishing. And let's see here. So, the first thing we're going to talk about is what's a webinar. We're going to talk about the what is, why is it a webinar, and we're going to talk about live, evergreen, and selecting webinar platforms. But what is a webinar? We're going to talk about different types of webinars because there are different things that you can do using webinar platforms. You can use them for training, you can use them for meetings, and you can use them for sales. A training webinar, and each one of these types of webinars is very, very separate and very, very different. And they each have their own kind of rules and characteristics, so that each of these has you have success using them different ways. A training webinar is a great thing for a broker or manager to use for in-house group coaching. That's an example of a training webinar. A training webinar like that would also have some really, really good utility for recruiting. So a broker manager who is using webinars in his business to help agents learn things, where agents don't always have to come into the office, where they don't have to have a physical presence, and where he may be able to attract a lot more training, could be done very, very well and used very, very effectively for in-house group coaching. And that type of coaching may be something very, very appealing to somebody who's working in another office. So a training webinar can be a great recruiting tool. Meeting webinars are great. You can have meetings, all kinds of meetings. You can have client meetings on a webinar. You can use GoToWebinar or GoToMeeting to present offers. I can't tell you how many times that I was working with sellers or buyers and people were all in different physical locations, sometimes around the world. But people, travel for business. You have people who are absentee owners. You have buyers who are in escrow, who are under contract, who may be out of town, and you have people who who it would be nice, to be able to sit down with them and show them something. Well, you can do that in a virtual way. You don't have to do it in person. You don't have to do it in the flesh. You can have a meeting with clients, and you can go over a contract. You can put the contract up on your screen, share that with people, and and go over the points and be very, very clear about that. I think that's a much better way than working with email and other ways. I think that's terrific. You can do presentations by webinar. Goodness, years ago I was doing using this to do listing presentations. And when you have out-of-state owners, that's a terrific way to do it. It's much more personal. You have an ability to interact, to talk to people, to hear what their concerns are, to be able to meet their objections and go on. And you can have a conference on a webinar. And with some of these webinar platforms right now, you can have a conference and have everybody's face up on the screen. One of the ways of doing this too is having a webinar using Skype. Skype is for small groups, for meetings and for these small conferences and masterminds even. Skype works very, very well. And Skype is for that type of meeting is very, very inexpensive. So it's great for conferences. And then, of course, we've got the sales webinar. Now, this is the one that we're going to focus on primarily today. We will be talking about the others, but for the purposes of webinar fever starting out, and for the core training, we're going to be talking about sales webinars and how to use the sales webinars. Again, we're talking about using webinars to engage with people, to reach out and help alleviate their pain somewhere. What kind of pain are they feeling? In real estate, I think a lot of people right now are feeling pain about financing. They have credit issues. They have problems. Sellers have problems because a lot of sellers are underwater and they owe more on their house than their house is worth. And of course, you have lots of new things that are happening. You have trends. So having an educational type of an outreach program that of course is part of your marketing program is what I refer to as edu marketing. And I've got that in bold on that mind map because I think that is really, really key, and that is really where the focus of my attention is for this program. Product creation is another thing we can do with a sales webinar. Again, you can take the webinar and you can repurpose it after the live event is finished. Now, this is early on a Saturday morning. We're creating this live webinar. At the same time that we're creating the live webinar, I am recording it. And when I have finished recording it, I'm going to be doing some other stuff with that recording, and you can do this anywhere. So we're going to talk about other niches and some advanced techniques about working with this material. And I'm also going to be talking today about actually converting this to another kind of webinar altogether. The other thing you can do with webinars is also create bonus material for other stuff that you're doing. And one of the things to do as part of a sales webinar is wrap it up in a package, kind of an offering of information in different modalities for people to read. It's a great bribe. It's called an ethical bribe in the internet marketing world. It's called an ethical bribe is when it's an incentive for people to register. And you may say, if you register for my webinar, I'll be happy to share a special report. What you want to be, to pay attention to when you create a special report or offer that is make sure that the subject in the special report is something that corresponds to the subject in the webinar that you are offering. You may want to take some information and create an e-course. And what's an e-course? Well, you know what? It's really simple. An e-course is a series of emails and perhaps a combination of blog posts if you like that cover a topic in very, very small bites. So you may want to create an e-course. Again, I keep coming back to HUD Homes because I'm just a HUD Homes I have a HUD Homes passion. But you may want to create an e-course on how to buy a HUD home. What is a HUD home? Who can buy HUD homes? What are the timelines? What do you need to have before you buy that? In a series of emails that may be actually linked to a blog post or a video, and then schedule those emails to go out on once a day over a week or so, or maybe every other day, and then call it an e-course. What it is it's a drip autoresponder system, and that's what we used to call it. We used to say we have a drip campaign, and an e-course is really a nice euphemism for an email campaign that contains valuable information that people will use to help them understand how to do something better. How to maybe how to buy a HUD home, or how to stage their homes, or maybe how to sell their homes on their own. I think that the e-courses and campaigns around FSBOs is really exciting. And if you if you hang with me for a bit, you're going to see some really fun stuff happening around FSBOs, and I'm going to be taking all of this information and doing some really, really fun stuff with FSBOs in the near term here. I love FSBOs. I used to love them as a realtor when I was a realtor, and I still do. You can create a video series. So instead of just having an email that contains the information, you may have an email that has a link to a video that has a small webcast of you, or a small video of you just talking about something for 60 seconds or less or more, but under 2 minutes. But that kind of video series is very popular. You might also offer them a free consultation with you if they attend, and of course a consultation is something that gets you on the phone with them or in person with them, and helps you connect offline in a very, very meaningful way. We're going to be talking about why a webinar is important, and why a webinar is good is because a webinar is something that really, really is makes people think of attending. It's an event, so there's a different thought about that. than there is, when there isn't not an event attached to it. So people, make put something on their calendar. They make an event. They make a commitment to attend. And when people are making that kind of a commitment, they're giving it a lot of attention. We're going to be talking about live webinars. Okay, live webinars happen in real time. You've got, you have video and audio. You can see the screen. You can see a screen, and you can hear somebody speaking. When you see the screen, you can see the presentation, and sometimes you can also see the presenter. The audio it happens on the telephone or on the computer. If you're listening to this live, I've given you a choice with GoToWebinar of listening to this on the telephone using a telephone number that GoToWebinar provides, or by VoIP on the computer. As a webinar presenter, you should understand and you should know that when people have, an opportunity to do one or the other, that a telephone is the type of audio receiving instrument that really works best. And if you're going to start doing webinars and you haven't already, what you will find, I guarantee, over time is that you will have a lot of people who are listening to it on their computer who will say they're having great difficulty. A lot of the difficulty in listening on the computer is difficulty that is an absolute function of a person's computer and or connection. And I know that if I have hundreds of people on the line, I may have, let's say 600 people on a line. If I have 500 who can hear me fine, and there will be 100 who will always say, maybe not that many at a time, but usually there's a fairly good sized number and percentage of people who just can't hear it. And again, that becomes another reason for for people to start thinking about what we call an evergreen webinar. Okay, an evergreen webinar is not something in real time. It has the video. It can be somewhat interactive, but it's different. Okay, it is different because it's pre-recorded. It's automated. What I'm going to be doing with today's live webinar is taking the video or videos, because I'm going to have a lot of videos, and I'm going to be creating some evergreen webinars. And those are evergreen webinars that will contain video. They will also, my evergreen webinars will simulate a live webinar, and there will be a feeling by the people who are attending that, they'll have a sense that it's happening live. There are certain presentation skills attached to doing a live webinar, that can be used well as an evergreen webinar. And I'll give you an example. I promised you earlier that I would share with you, a mistake and a faux pas. Now, if I was really, really paying attention, I would probably not say this morning or this afternoon or this evening or make it, or refer to the time of day. I would not refer to the date or the season, because an evergreen webinar is something that is not, it's something that somebody can listen to anytime. If you're only going to show conduct your webinars in the morning, then it's okay to say this morning. I was on an evergreen webinar recently, and you know what? I thought I was going to a live webinar. It didn't matter. It was a wonderful internet marketer, and it was quite interesting because I signed up for a morning webinar and I was attending in the morning, and he said, "Yeah, tonight, this evening, this is what we've been talking about." And it was obvious to me that it was an evergreen webinar, but it was also obvious that he kind of missed it, because if he was planning an evergreen webinar when he did it live, then he probably would have avoided saying that. And if he hadn't said that, I probably would have been left wondering, was it live or wasn't it? Because evergreen webinars can be also very, very interactive, just like another webinar. You can have a poll. You can have a poll where people can vote, and you can show some results. We're going to talk about that a little bit. There are ways of doing that are cool ways of doing it, and others that are not. I mean, obviously, you don't want to create a poll and create an end result for a poll that is designed to meet your agenda, whether it's a sales agenda or any kind of agenda. Do I build polls into my evergreen webinars? Yes, occasionally I do, but I only do that with information that I have already received on, in other webinars and in other live events, where I get results that are consistently the same. I'll give you an example about that. I work in real estate social media policies and procedures area. I'm a co-author of a manual about that, and I do some training. And my co-author and I have done lots of webinars and lots of training. And when we can ask a question and poll the audience, does your brokerage have a written social media policy and procedure manual? And it's never been higher than 10%. So, it wasn't higher than 10% 2 or 3 years ago, and it still isn't in live types of events. So would I be comfortable in having a poll like that in an Evergreen webinar? Yes, in that kind of a case, I would. Again, it's not something that you want to manufacture. You want to use that judiciously. You want to be smart about it. You want to be honest. But I think that's a kind of a neat thing to do. Chat, you can have an interactive chat on an Evergreen webinar, and we'll talk about that. I've actually monitored my chat, and I'll show you how, because I'm going to do a whole couple of pieces on Evergreen webinar. I have actually had real-time exchanges with people who were sitting on Evergreen webinars that I had, and then establish relationships with them. There's no voice, no voice on an Evergreen webinar. You can't, jump in the middle of it. You can't, involve yourself in live, in real time on an Evergreen webinar, because it's video based. So you should know that. Selecting a webinar platform. We'll talk about some different webinar platforms because there are different types of webinars. So for live webinars, what do we want to think about? What do we recommend? What do we talk about? I'll tell you what I think. And I'm going to add one here too. Hold on a second here. I'm going to add Skype, and I'm going to add one more here. I'm going to add Yagma. Okay. One of the things I like about the mind maps is that in the middle of a presentation, if something occurs to you, you can just make a change on the fly. You can't do that with a PowerPoint presentation very, very easily without going back, and that's a little bit more of a commotion. That's one of the reasons I like my mind mapping. So let's talk about live webinars here for a second, and what I recommend and what I think you should take a look at. I think GoToWebinar is really good right now. They certainly had their challenges for some years with technology. It was very, very spotty. It was really not very, very reliable for a long time. I was very disenchanted with them, but they really have come a long way. One of the nice things that they have going for them right now is it's called HD Faces, where you can actually have the picture of the presenter, not just a picture, but a live view with your webcam while you're presenting. I could have done that with this series here right now. The reason I didn't was because it just came out of beta. I've seen a couple of people use that in their webinars. They did not do it very successfully. The only real successful applications I've seen so far have been, in GoToWebinar training tutorials, and so I didn't want to take that chance. I will be doing it very shortly. As soon as the first round of these webinars is finished, I'm going to move my platform over to that. What happens is once you go from the platform as it exists now and you change to that, you can't go back. So because this is what I know and this is what I've done and I've got it down, I just didn't want to risk that. But GoToWebinar is great. They have lots of really, really good functionality. They've got all their bases covered, and I think that's a good one. WebEx does a terrific job. WebEx really is the gold standard of webinar technology. WebEx is great, but it's more expensive for the most part. So you pay a lot more. And it's great. I've presented on WebEx many times, and it's a good program. If you want to check that out, that's great. If you're going to be doing lots of webinars, definitely check it out. And talk to the reps who are answering the phone and cut a deal. There's a lot of negotiating that happens in webinars. Instant teleseminar I like. It's a little more static than the others. You have to upload your PowerPoint, so you can't really you can't really, work with animations and things, and it's uploaded to their platform, so you can't make any changes to anything once it's there. But it's really, really easy to work with once you've uploaded it. It's very easy to advance, and it's very, very easy to operate. I'm going to do a separate video here on a couple of the workarounds, but I think that's a very, very good service. A couple of good things that I like about it a lot are the fact that it creates a really great landing page, and it creates a recording of your webinar that's available immediately afterward, and that's pretty neat. So instant teleseminar, and the other thing is that it's a teleseminar service as well. Certainly, if you wanted to use GoToWebinar as a teleseminar service, you can also do that, and then of course you would be using the telephone number primarily, and that's the whole idea with teleconferences. Although you can also listen to it online. So if you don't want to be interacting, or you might even be interacting, the VoIP is okay for some people. I personally have no problem with VoIP. I have no problem with computers, working with the computer speakers and microphones versus the telephone. But again, if you're going to be doing this, you need to know as a presenter that a lot of people will have that problem. There's a new platform now called AnyMeeting at anymeeting.com. That's a free live webinar platform, and they do recording. I looked at it. I haven't used it yet. I've seen some people using it. It seems to have lots of really good features, lots of good functions, and I think it's definitely worth looking at. They have a paid version. The free version is supported by advertising, and if that's if you think that's all right, that's fine. I personally, I don't think that coming up with a webinar that has advertising for all kinds of products around it is really, really a good idea for a professional. I think it looks a little cheesy, to be honest with you, but people are using it, they're happy with it, and the paid version looks pretty neat. There's another company called Stealth. They started with Evergreen Webinars, and I haven't used this one yet. I don't think that they're as fully featured as some of the others, but I hear wonderful things about their customer service, and that's the reason I'm mentioning that here. I've heard people talk about it. People like Frank Kern, who is Mr. Big in the internet marketing community. Frank Kern is probably the single most brilliant internet marketer on planet Earth. And in a book I recently read about webinars by Lewis Howes, he talks about Stealth, and he's been using Stealth. So I think it's worth mentioning. I haven't used it myself, but I think you can take a look at that. Skype, again, for small groups. You definitely look at it. Skype is great. It does get squirrely. So, if you schedule a mastermind or you schedule some kind of a meeting webinar and it just doesn't work on Skype, everybody pretty much, goes with the flow because everybody has that experience. So, it's very, very forgiving. It's usually not your fault. It's usually something to do with the connection, and people know that. For that reason, you don't want to do anything too critical on Skype where you don't have a backup plan. There's a platform called Yugma that also is a live webinar platform. Yugma, I used to use that quite a bit. They also had a paid platform. They had paid and a fee platform. Quite interesting. You might want to go and check that out. Yugma also has a plugin for Skype, so you can use Yugma in conjunction with Skype to conduct your webinars. And I used to do quite a bit with them and like them a lot. There are some that have just come off the market and either been bought out by somebody or just not worth talking about. There are, the other thing about live webinars is there are a lot of companies that offer webinars right now as part of multi-level marketing programs, and most of those, to be honest with you, that I've looked at, I don't like. I don't like the features that are that are attached to them. Some of them may be very, very easy, but they're really not as robust as the stuff that I look at. So when they're part of a multi-level marketing plan, I tend to stay away from them. The features that you want to look at, or what kind of presentations can you give on that? If you want to be able to use lots of different types of presentations, you're going to go with something like GoToWebinar. If you want to go on the live web, you're not going to use somebody like Instant Teleseminar, for instance, or some others. So take a look and see how featured they are. What do you want to do? What kind of presentations do you want to give? And take a look at that. If you want to go live on the web, it's going to just leave certain people out. So take a look and see what the features are, and what you want to do. Take a look and see what their registration procedures are like. Some of them will build a list for you and give you a list of registrants and give you a list of people who attended, tell you how long they attended, and then collect other information. GoToWebinar will do that. It will collect the information from the survey that you put out. It will also collect any engagement that happens when people are online. So when you pull up an Excel spreadsheet after you have completed a webinar, you will get the person's name, you'll get their email address, you will get the results of of the survey that they filled in, you will get any text transcripts of chat that they've had, and also if they have responded to polls that you've created, you will get that as well. I like to be able to work with integrated cross-channel features in my webinar. I'm just tired. I have grown weary of working with a million channels. Working with multiple channels, multiple communication channels is not the same as cross-channel marketing. Working with multiple channels means you have more stuff to do. It means you have more technology to keep track of. In many cases, more technology to pay for. And if the technology doesn't talk to each other, it's a pain in the neck. So I have really, 2011 and 2012 have been a time that I've come together and really, married my technology so that I'm working with fewer platforms, but the technology talks to each other. In terms of the webinar, it's one of the reasons I'm working with two autoresponder systems, Aweber and Instant Customer. It's because I can take my Aweber account, and I've been collecting registrations, from GoToWebinar, and I can do it in one process instead of two. I can make my Aweber account and my Instant Customer account talk to each other. So if I'm getting a new customer registration on Aweber, I can send that to a campaign in Instant Customer, where I have the ability to work with SMS text messaging, and I can create the QR code, and I can work with voicemail marketing, and I can have a built-in Evergreen system, and I can have a contest platform where I can give away a free gift or whatever. So having integrated cross-channel features to me is very, very important. If that's not important to you, then almost anything works. But the choices that I've made in my technology, the technology that I'm talking about on blogmotherfran.com, everything that I talk about really has an eye to marrying technology and to making technology work and talk to each other, one channel to the next, to make it easier to build your business, to collect registrations, to build a list, to communicate with the people on your list, really to connect with them, build their trust, build your credibility, build your expert authority. And at the end of the day, have them, engage with you in a transactional relationship, buy something from you. Sell something through you, hire you as a consultant. If you're a vendor and you sell something else, people will be buying. So it's a matter of establishing a relationship and enough trust that those are people who want to do business with you. And I think that's accomplished much more easily with a cross-channel system. And then, of course, finally, and last but not least, are Evergreen Webinars. And I've got two different Evergreen Webinar systems. I had Evergreen Business Systems first. It's a really neat system. I'm going to explain them both to you. And I have an Instant Customer Evergreen Webinar that's really, really easy to use, very, very simple, and it works with everything else that you have. So I'll tell you what I'll be doing. For instance, this webinar right now, this view from 30,000 feet, will be a webinar that I will move into and create an Evergreen Webinar. I'll create an Evergreen Webinar at Instant Customer. I'll also create an Evergreen Webinar at at my EBS system here. And I will do that within another video. So after I have created this video, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move it over into the platform that we have for you over on Kajabi, on my membership site on blogmotherfran.com. Then I'm going to take that same video, I'm going to create an evergreen webinar, I'm going to create a landing page, I'm going to create a campaign around it, and I'm going to do that in a way that you can look over my shoulder and you can see exactly how I do that every step of the way. Meeting webinars are a way you can raise some cosmic dust in your market in a way that never seemed possible before. You can bring people together virtually who might never come together in person. There are lots of ways of doing that. Let's take a look at a different number of ways we can use meetings in real estate and create meeting webinars. Franchises use meetings to talk to franchise owners across very, very large areas, across the country, across a continent, around the world, in a region. A webinar is a great place to bring people together to talk about common goals, common strategies. It's a great, great tool for a franchise. A brokerage can use online meetings when you have a multi-office situation. Bring together managers, bring together department heads, bring together staff and independent contractors. Within a brokerage, have a sales meeting. Not all real estate agents can come to sales meetings. People have really, really conflicting schedules that don't make it real possible to come together, and webinars make that possible. Agent teams, it's the same thing. Agent teams, you've got different people responsible for different things. You may have them located all around town. Being able to have a virtual meeting where people can stay in their own office or do it from their own home office saves people time in travel. Half an hour each way in a car to go to a meeting is an hour that people have to carve out of their day. There are just so many times that you can do that and not really cost people productivity and ultimately hit the bottom line. So working with webinars in teams is a real great idea. You can create an advisory group. Think about an advisory group with people in your market, people in your geographic market who may be able to help you, reach out and reach more people in your demographic market. It's a real great way to share intelligence, share information about the market with an advisory group. And an advisory group can meet online. Create a roundtable, talk about best practices about any area of your business. Create a roundtable and have a discussion about foreclosures, have a discussion about short sales, have a discussion about the best practices that are happening. Create those roundtables, pass the microphone around from one person to another. Share. You can do that much more easily, much more frequently, and in a very, very rich manner with webinars. Create seminars, in-house seminars for agents, in-house seminars and trainings for your other groups. Again, do that in a meeting format. Customer education. When you're doing this in this kind of a format, that's different than a sales webinar. When you're creating customer education and having meetings, you're inviting a very, very special, rich type of interaction with your consumers, with those people who you're bringing into your business as prospects and future customers that you were never able to do before. In a way, you were never able to do it, and do that virtually. Very, very rich way of working with webinars. Let's take a look at a team meeting cycle and an example of how this meeting webinar can work in a real estate team. So we've got a couple of agents who have a team going. Let's call them Jill and Jack, and Jill and Jack are going to schedule a meeting later in the week with their team. They've got some listing agents, we've got some buyers agents, a couple of transaction coordinators, and they're going to be meeting later in the week. They may even invite their VAs to come in. They've got a couple of those. Jill and Jack are going to put together a detailed agenda and they've they're working with a team that's a very, very busy team. 3 of the members of that team are on the road right now. One of those members is out of town at a conference, and that person is going to attend via an iPhone. I'm sorry, or an iPad or an Android tablet. So that's pretty cool. One of the members of the team is going to register with his iPhone, and another member is not going to be able to attend, but he can catch it on the replay because everything is going to be recorded. Jill and Jack are going to assign a password for the meeting. There are definitely some things they don't want to be sharing with the world, or necessarily with other people who have access to other rooms in their meeting space there. So they're going to record that for their team and ask people to use a password. They're also going to upload documents for review prior to the meeting. Every member of the team has an opportunity to review those documents and then post comments below the space in the collaborative meeting area so that they can start getting on the same page prior to the meeting. During the meeting, the team leader is going to present a PowerPoint with a succinct outline of all of the major points, all of the points he wants to talk about, and then team members are going to share other documents in the meeting space. So people who have information relative to the to the projects, germane to the task at hand, will be able to share that. They're also able to add additional people to the space during the week. They may invite some other people in. There may be a lender who is going to be joining an open house promotion and be available at an open house to do some pre-qualifying. Maybe has a team to do that as well. They are able to schedule recurring meetings. Maybe they have just figured out that would be a very, very cool thing to do, to have recurring meetings at the same time every week, and they can do that very, very quickly. All members have access to the recordings and the files, and they have access on demand. So the entire recording of the meeting is available. If people want to listen to it again, listen to a certain part of it, they can do that, and they can download those files again. Team members who are working on a project, who are working in Excel or working in Word or working in in another document, may have some thoughts as they're working on it. They can start an instant meeting and jump right into that collaborative meeting area right from those documents, right from within those documents, and start an instant meeting with another person on their team just like that. Sharing files was never easier than it is right now in a meeting webinar. People within a group, within a meeting webinar, can collaborate to create presentations and reports right online. You can create a file in a media library. You can create an entire library of materials that people on your team can use, that you can take out of the file at any given point in time during a meeting webinar to present to the group, to review with the group, and to work with. Those same files are files that may be contract files. You can have a meeting again with clients. You can be presenting a contract for a buyer or a seller to review before signing. You can be presenting your listing contract, for goodness sake. Anyway, you can create a media library and do that in the file. You can assign privileges and permissions to people so that only some people can make changes on a contract. And you can leave messages for people in a meeting space, kind of like putting a sticker on a bulletin board. You can create your own virtual bulletin board right in your meeting space. Team members can share their relevant emails in a meeting space. Lots of engagement happens there. People with a high level of permission to run the room, a room monitor, a virtual room monitor, can have a list and create a list of people who can share certain materials. You may have a team or a room where you invite strategic partners. You may invite people from a title company, from the lending community, from the housing counseling community. You may have different levels of permissions for different people to share different documents depending upon the project in which you're engaged. You can share updated files and notes about changes. Final files can contain history notes. You can lock them. So file management in a meeting space is very, very great. And the other neat thing that's very, very neat with the way the technology is emerging is the way that you can use mobile applications in webinars. And people now, are signing in and attending webinars on their smartphones. They're using the iPad to to attend webinars on a lot of platforms, and they're using the Android tablet. So mobile applications are bringing people together. You can have your meetings with people all over the place, and they don't even have to, be sitting at a computer. They can be working someplace in a remote area using a mobile device and still be able to participate, still be able to see what you have to share, still be able to review documents and do all of that type of interaction right from their tablets or their smartphones. One of the things you hear me talk about these days, and I talk about it a lot, is cross-channel marketing. And cross-channel marketing is a way, and a way of thinking and a way of running your business that is about integrating your platforms, making one kind of technology work with another kind of technology. Use what you have and make it better and more efficient. It's not about using a lot of different things separately, a lot of multiple platforms everywhere. That is very, very hard. That gets very confusing, and it's very, very time consuming. Using productivity tools in a webinar situation is a perfect example of really making the best of technology. You already have some kind of email client. You're already using Outlook or some other type of email client, calendar client. When you can schedule a meeting right from that email client, right from your calendar, you're going to be 2 steps ahead of everybody else. Be able to upload documents to a meeting space. Being able to start and join meetings right from your calendar, and being able to initiate meetings right from within a document as you're creating a Word document, as you're creating a PowerPoint, or as you're creating an Excel spreadsheet. When something comes up and you need to have some kind of interaction with a team member or a strategic partner or somebody, and you can do that and initiate that contact right from that document, that's going to make your life a whole lot easier at the end of the day. When you're making it easier, when you're working more efficiently, when you're able to be more effective, that's when you see dramatic results in your business. And that, ultimately, you're going to see dramatic results in your bottom line. Let's consider the logistics involved in training in real estate. I remember, back in the mid 80s when I got into real estate, we used to travel pretty far and wide to attend training sessions. And these days, franchises and real estate broker networks have a very, very, very real challenge in meeting training demands and training schedules, because frankly, they are very, very expensive. Traveling is very, very expensive, and the cost of training is expensive on both sides of the equation. If there is an event, participants have to book travel and they have to book hotels. With webinars, that's not necessary because the participants don't have to go any further than their home base, whether that's an office setting or their actual home, or offices. Webinars can reach people where they are without the need for travel and hotels. By the same token, events management is a whole different ball game. Events management, of course, is something that comes into play when there's a training, and in the old days, and in present day, when there is a live training, there are a number of logistical factors that you have to consider, and costs. Certainly not the least of those is booking a training facility. And whether that's a conference room or a ballroom or, a room in a hotel and other facilities, that involves a very, very great deal of money. There is the cost of audiovisual equipment. There may be additional costs for technical support connected with that, involved with the setup, involved with maintaining that, involved with making sure that it runs okay, and having somebody on hand to troubleshoot. There is a cost of meals and refreshments. When people are, attending a training, they get thirsty and they become hungry, and there are meals to take care of. And whether the organization is responsible for that or the attendees, there are still costs involved. There is also the cost involved with office supplies, with paper, with all of those consumables. There is a great, a good deal of cost involved with Wi-Fi access in many places around the country, and there is, there's work and cost involved with follow-up after the event. Okay, with a webinar, what happens there? Okay, what happens there is that the conference provider, the service that is offering the webinar service, providing that service, actually does most of the heavy lifting for you. The conference provider will have a function that will help you reserve the participants' time. It will send out invitations to people on your list. The conference provider will collect registrations, which are the RSVPs, to make sure that people will be attending. You'll be able to keep track of that. You'll also be able to see, who has attended and how long they have stayed. If you are charging for your event, the conference provider, in many cases, has a payment solution. In some cases, that's a payment solution that's an e-commerce solution, and in other cases, they will arrange for check delivery. Conference provider often has surveys and will often provide follow-up as well. Content sharing, content distribution, and content review. So in days past, content would be shared sometimes over a teleconference, and again, sometimes in person. So on an in-person setting, that's one thing. With teleconference, documents had to be emailed, often, pray for safe delivery. With a webinar, we have a whole different ballgame these days, because the documents are available for review online. Attendees and presenters can take a look at a shared document together, consider that document together, and they can be shared and annotated in real time. In some of the more advanced platforms, and certainly in WebEx and a couple of the others, you can have a group of people working on the same document in a collaborative working space, and and sharing documents that way. It's much more advanced these days. Recording of the event. In the old days, you might have had an audio recording, some transcription and notes attached to a teleconference. I didn't see a whole lot of recording of live conferences, certainly. That was just basic note taking. But right now with a webinar, one-click audio is pretty much the rule of the day, and that is the state of the art. So you can have a webinar, set it to record, and shortly afterward, have a button to be able to access that recording and review it on demand 24/7. Some of the alternatives to hosting it on a conferences server is to download it to your own, and in most cases, you can do that with great ease. And then last but not least, let's talk a little bit about the psychology of online training. We find out exactly why webinars are so powerful. A webinar is a way for people to experience something in a group setting before they have to do it themselves. The intimidation of doing something new is greatly reduced when people have the opportunity to walk through something on a trial run with an expert without the fear of making a mistake. A virtual setting is also very, very non-threatening. A lot of people are just basically more comfortable interacting in a virtual space, and that can be easier than having people stare at them when they raise their hand and ask a question. People learn from other people's questions. If you have 10 people in a room, 9 people may have the same question, and answering that question for one person answers it for everybody. So it really does, scale training. The other thing that's really, really worth considering is the fact that a long session doesn't keep everybody very, very focused for a long time. It takes tremendous skill to keep everybody, on the same page, to keep everybody totally engaged in a discussion over many, many hours. So a webinar gives you an opportunity to have shorter bursts of training, and you can do that on a regular basis with frequent training sessions, and that gives you a better shot at keeping people focused. And it also lets you keep everybody in the loop at all times. Again, you don't have to have everybody there at the same time necessarily, because you have recording functions, because you have the ability to go back and revisit the training. Also, going back and revisiting training after you've already been through it, enhances and expands the a participant's ability to retain information that they heard the first time. Let's talk about the sales webinar. The sales webinar is different than the meeting and training webinars because, of course, you're selling something. There's a different objective, and therefore it's set up differently. And there's some great training about this at any of the places where you're going to get these webinars that I'm recommending. At Instant Customer, there is an enormous amount of training and support on the back end for doing sales webinars as well. At Evergreen Business Systems, there's some additional support. Over at Stealth, there's support. So there's some great stuff, but let me just distill the essential components of a sales webinar. And let's talk about structure first. And whether you're doing the seminar alone or with a guest or the webinar, what you want to do is you want to work with 3 promises. Webinars work really, really well when you work in 3s. Make 3 promises and find 3 big problems that your customers or clients have. So make 3 promises that will take care of 3 big problems that your folks have. You don't want to do too much because you don't want to overwhelm them. So 3 promises that take care of 3 problems, and do as much of that with storytelling as you can. There's not, you just can't. I can't emphasize that enough. Do things in parables. Tell them in stories. Talk about the problems in terms of real people. If you had the problem, talk about your problems and how you overcame them. If your clients had a problem and overcame the problem, talk about it in terms of real people, in real life stories. Don't speak theoretically. That's a very, very essential component of having success with a webinar. I had a great training over at Instant Customer with Mike Koenigs, where he actually likened it to a 3-act play. He said the story structure of a webinar should resemble a 3-act play. Talk about the problem. That's the enemy, the failure, the struggle. The revelation of what you could do, the solution. Be the hero. And then talk about the results, and then offer proof about that. That really is what distills a successful webinar, the components. And then 3 to-dos. You tell people what you want. Say, here's what I have. Here's the product. Here's what it will do for you. That'll tell you what it does. And here's what I want you to do now. Send them to the page. Send them to the button where they can buy it. Send them to the link where they can get more information. So, those are the 3 most important elements in getting to a close. Here's what I have. Here's what it'll do for you. And here's what I want you to do now. And again, that's the, the essence of a sales webinar. There's lots and lots of good stuff at the back end of all of these places, and we'll be talking some more about this in some bonus material we have coming up soon. So keep your eyes open, and we'll take that to the next level. Let's get to it, and let's actually start a webinar. We're going to create our webinar on GoToWebinar.com. I'm going to log in. I have a separate training account here so that I can do this and not compromise anything that I have cooking. I am working with a number of clients, and I'm doing some work with them, and I don't want all of that information spread all over the web, because what you're going to see here is just, again, a look inside. So here we go. Here is a look at the behind the scenes GoToWebinar, and this is my little new training account. All right. So we're going to create a new webinar. Now you see here at GoToWebinar, you can create different kinds of meetings and webinars. And we're going to create one from the start, right from the start, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And then I'm going to show you, how you can go over there and get some other information. GoToWebinar, one of the reasons I like it as a platform and a company is that they have an awful lot of really, really neat videos and tutorials. And those videos and tutorials are very, very helpful. So I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. I will show you where to go and get those. But in the meantime, I want to start a webinar, and we'll start one and show you exactly how easy it is. So it's I'm going to time this too, and we'll see exactly how long it takes. So we're going to schedule a webinar. We hit schedule a webinar here, and the first thing it asks you for is a title and a description. Now, if you have other things that you've been doing in other webinars, you can actually kind of reload them and just recreate them. But we're going to call this one. I'm going to call this one 10 copyright commandments that keep keep real estate bloggers out of trouble. How about that? Keep real estate. Yeah, blogging and copyright don't really mix very, very well in real estate, and that's one of the trainings I do. I want you to keep a couple of things in mind when you're creating a webinar name. This is something that you want to make SEO friendly. You want it to be catchy. You want it to be hooky. You want it to grab the attention of your audience. So I could have said, copyright things to know. I could say, copyright for real estate bloggers. I could say a lot of things, but I want it to be active. I want it to speak to a result. There has to be a result. The result is that if you follow the rules and you follow copyright policies and procedures in the right way, that you're going to stay out of trouble. Because if you don't, if you do things wrong, if you take other people's intellectual property, if you swipe that, whether you know it or not, you can get in trouble. And so you want to have a very, very hooky headline, and then you want a description, and then we'll just say this is a webinar about again, that would be a longer description. What you want to do is what you'll have is a planning guide. I'm going to give you a worksheet and a planning guide that will let you plan all of this in advance. So it will ask you to write a title and a description, a webinar name, a description. You can create that on a worksheet and then just fill that in. And that will make it much easier for you. So when you log into the platform on Tuesday, you will have all of that information and you can use that. You can also go to GoToWebinar and set up a 30-day trial where you can use the platform and not have to pay anything for it. My suggestion is that you take a look at what we're doing here, see what's involved, and then go and actually use your worksheet, create a lot of this information on the worksheet first, so that when your 30-day trial starts, you really get the best and the most out of it. If you start the trial first, and then you go back and you start to look at all of the videos and start to work with the worksheets, it may be a week or two actually before you actually get around to making one, and then half of your trial is up. So my suggestion is that you take a look at this now. Don't register yet. Don't register for your trial if you don't have GoToWebinar, but work with your worksheets and get this information in. You want to, you have a total of 2,048 maximum characters in this description box. You don't need a really long description, but you do, you do want to be able to tell people enough about what your webinar is going to be about that it gets them in there. If you're going to be talking about how to stage your home prior to a sale, you might want to get into a little bit more detail. If you're talking about lending and you're talking about dealing with some credit issues, you want a really hooky headline, and then you want to be able to give them a little bit of the about the features and the benefits. Always tie features with benefits. It's about what people are really looking to accomplish, what they want to achieve. At the end of the day, what are they going to get out of whatever it is you're sharing with them? So don't make it about the tool. Don't make it about the information. Make it about the benefit that your attendee will receive at the end of the day, when that after the webinar is finished. What will they go home with? From Webinar Fever, what you're going to be leaving with at the end of the day, at the end of the training, is an ability to go and start your own webinar, to know what tools you have to use, to know how to write a hooky headline, to be able to do all of this stuff and do it in a way that will attract attendees and build your business, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. Schedule it in advance. Today is March 24th. Probably a good time to be scheduling something is a couple weeks out. A lot of people think that Monday's a terrible day for deadlines. I'm inclined for webinars, and I'm inclined to agree. Tuesday through Thursday are good. I hear some people saying Friday's terrible. To be honest, I like Fridays. I also like Saturdays. But you take a look at your audience, connect with your market, find out when people would like to attend a webinar. And remember that, a live webinar is very, very good. So we'll just say April 11th. How about that? We'll say this is going to be April 11th from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. And we're going to schedule this Pacific time. You have an opportunity here to establish a recurring webinar. You may want to establish a series of webinars, and if you do that, then you will have an ability to share links and sign-ins that people don't have to get confused about. In the old days, it was very, very hard to do this when I first started doing webinars. When we first started doing No Blogger Left Behind, it was, part of the nightmare about doing webinars in those days was that you couldn't schedule in the early parts of No Blogger Left Behind, you couldn't schedule the recurring webinars. And every single week, people had to get another notice and another link, and sometimes they were people were using the wrong link to sign in, and they were confused and unhappy, and it, the technology just wasn't evolved as it is right now. So if you are scheduling a weekly webinar, let's say, which I'm going to be doing for No Blogger Left Behind very shortly, I'll have a weekly webinar for the people in the class. You'll be able to use the same link every single time. You may want to do that daily, weekly, monthly, whatever, and use that. Again, there's some real good training about that. You have an ability to edit the audio conference options, and again, there are different possibilities. So what I do, and I stay with the default settings here, I let people make their own choice. They can use the VoIP, which is listening at your computer using the microphones and speakers attached to your computer, or a long distance number. So each webinar at GoToWebinar is assigned its own telephone number. Or you can use your own conference call service if you like, and do that as well. So you have all those options. Just so that you know, the most reliable way of listening to a webinar and hearing a webinar is with the telephone. So you can use that. You can disable the VoIP. A lot of people don't have real good connections or may not have good connections, and certainly a lot of people who don't have good connections don't realize that, and they're very, very quick and happy to assign blame to the webinar platform, to the webinar presenter. So you have a lot of that type of human dynamic that happens around the technology. You can limit that kind of discussion by just letting them use their number. It's a long distance number. Most people don't have to worry about long distance charges with cell phones anymore, so that's not as big an issue. You can, get a toll-free number from them if you want. Of course, there's some additional charges involved with that. Panelists are a really great idea. Panelists, if you want to work with panelists and people, I've done this, and I'll be doing a lot of this moving forward again. You can invite panelists into your webinar by putting their names and addresses here, email addresses, and what will happen when you put a panelist into a program, it will send them an email address. Now, obviously, you're going to want to talk to a panelist before you send them an email address and say, I'm having a webinar in such and such a day on April 11th. Would you like to join my webinar about copyright? Would you like to be part of that as a panelist? And you want to have that discussion with somebody prior to inviting them. Otherwise, they won't know, that you're doing that. So, again, that's part of a planning. That's going to be appearing on a checklist. We have a special checklist for working with panelists and guests. And I think that's a really, really neat thing to be able to do. It makes it a lot more interactive. It makes it a lot more interesting. Up here, there's a link that says, see how to create a webinar in 3 easy steps. And again, this is really, really neat platform for training. Schedule it, brand it, and create a registration. These are the 3 steps, and they have some really, really great training here. My suggestion is that when you do activate your free month of subscription, that you go in there and you do their little technical training and get up to speed on that, because that's very, very helpful. And then create a webinar from scratch that is a practice webinar. Don't just start a webinar and create a real webinar before you've done something that totally from scratch that you have done for practice. At least do one webinar where you have invited a couple of people who are going to be looking at this on a couple of different types of browsers. Get somebody to watch it on a Mac, get somebody to watch it on a PC, and then run a couple of tests and see how that goes. Just so that you're comfortable and you don't get to the webinar at the end of the day and find out that you've got a problem. Branding and theme, you can upload a logo here for yourself. I'm not going to go through all of this because it's very, very simple. You just click on the link, you pick a file from your computer, and you upload it. The logo image can be up to 400 by 200 pixels. You can choose a theme image. There's no image there, but you can upload an image here. It will appear in the right-hand column of the registration page. And then there's a webinar waiting room. You can fill that in. You can change the color of the waiting room. Your logo will appear here. You can have another custom image, and you can have a picture of yourself as a presenter. And then when the webinar is starting, and before you actually start your presentation, it's a page that holds people's attention, in the moments preceding the actual startup of the webinar. So you have a great deal of an ability to customize that. And then you can preview the theme, you can preview the waiting room, you can see what it looks like, and read that. And then, of course, if you see anything that needs to be fixed, you can always go back and you can change it. because everything that you've done here is editable. The registration, very, very important page here. Okay, and it's important because a lot of the default settings on this page are settings that you probably want to disable. It's an important rule of thumb to know is that less is more relative to registration. The more information you ask people for, the fewer people are going to come and actually register for your webinar. People don't want to give you a lot of information. The most you want to ask for is their name and email address, and sometimes you only want to ask for their email address for a webinar. You may not need a whole bunch of information. Once you have it, you're great. I would say deselect anything that is not absolutely essential. You don't need their phone number. You don't need their industry. You don't need their organization. For GoToWebinar, you do have to have first name, last name, and email address. So be aware of that. There will be additional information moving, in another video about ways you can actually collect these names on your list. Because remember, it's about building a list. It's about building your list and putting people into a sales funnel where you have an opportunity to connect with them, to share information, and to have other channels open to you. Just because somebody registers at GoToWebinar for your registration does not mean that you have permission to market to them. And you really want to be able to have permission to market to people and to be able to send them follow-up emails. Their names don't go on to an autoresponder list just because they register on GoToWebinar. There are a couple of tools that you can use that will make that happen. Those are called webinar bridges. You can use a webinar bridge. There's a webinar bridge for WordPress that works well. And there's another webinar bridge that you can use for any website, any blog that will let you create a page and your own registration page, and then have people sign up for the webinar on that page, and it will do two things simultaneously. Number one, it will sign them up for the webinar, and their name will appear on the registration list. And number two, their name will appear on your autoresponder list. Those webinar bridges do not work with all autoresponders. If you're working with one of the really, really premier tools like Aweber or GetResponse or iContact, you can do that kind of thing. But for some of them you can't. They don't necessarily work with some of the other ones. I'm also using an autoresponder called Instant Customer. There will be some additional training about that, and there will be a separate video about webinar bridges, because I think a webinar bridge is very, very important. You hate to be, going into webinar delivery and creating webinars if you're not going to be able to have an easy way to put those people on your list and be able to stay in touch with them on a regular basis. So webinar bridge is very, very important, and definitely check that one out. And now you can also create some questions for a survey, and this is a survey that people will get when they register. So you could make it required or not required. I can ask a question here about copyright. Do you use Creative Commons licensing on your blog? All right, and the Creative Commons licensing is a way that lets you share your content with your readers and with other people. I could make it one of two questions. I could say yes or no. That creates a question on my registration page. I can make it required or not. Again, if I make it required, people may not want to fill it out and they may not register. So I don't ever make anything required. Not that I might not one of these days, but less is more. So having something there is really neat. It can give you a little bit of insight into your audience. There are times when I'm doing webinars about blogging. There are times when I'm working with newbies and people who are still new to blogging, who don't really know a lot. And there are other times when I have an audience that may have been with me, for years already, that has been through No Blogger Left Behind, that may be, producing multiple blogs, and and the questions and the answers will vary, and my delivery will vary about blogging depending upon the level of interest and the level of savvy and knowledge about any given topic. And you'll find that as well. So having a little bit of a survey is kind of neat. You can ask, you can create one question, you can create multiple questions, and then those questions will actually appear on the survey. After they register, you can say, okay, they will receive an email with information about joining the webinar. That can be either an automatic or something that is subject to your approval. You can redirect the registrants to your website if you like. Let's take a look. I'll send them here to, how about to No Blogger Left Behind, and then we can preview it. Now, why would you want to approve somebody who's joining your webinar? Well, one of the reasons you may want to approve somebody joining the webinar is if you're doing something to engage an audience. You may even have some interaction. You may be inviting people to chat with you. You may be doing a lot. You may be working with home buyers or prospective home buyers. You may be working and talking to prospective home sellers. Well, maybe you don't want other realtors from other offices in town to be on the same webinar talking to you, prospects that you're working with. So if there is a likelihood that people are signing up and doing that, that becomes a reason that you may want to get an approval. I think there's another way to handle that, and one of the ways that you can handle that kind of approval is actually you can take a look at your registration list prior to the webinar, and you can remove people from the webinar also. So I mean that's another way of doing that. We can preview our page here. So here's what our page looks like. So I'm only asking for the first name and the last name. We have our title. We have our short description, and here is our question, and people will fill that in. Let's see here. Fran Torsen. Use that, and I can register. When I register, I click okay, this is a preview, so maybe this is not working because it's a preview, so sorry about that. Okay, but it's a good preview. So we close that, and then I can save. What will happen is when I save this whole setup, it will email me the invitation, and here it is right here. So this appears as the most recent webinar in my list. You can go back and you can edit any part of that you like. You can also add it to your Outlook calendar. Again, I really suggest that you go over to GoToWebinar, to the FAQs, and all of these really neat training videos. They have some very good resources for getting organized. GoToMeeting organizer training, attendee quick start. They have some phenomenal stuff here that you can use. The other thing that will be fun and that I'm looking forward to trying when I'm not doing it live, I'm going to do it very soon, is this new HD Faces. And that is a new program that just came out of beta. Let's see. Yeah, this is a pretty neat platform that will let you actually present yourself to your folks with with your presentation. And again, this just came out of beta. I haven't seen anybody doing it real well yet other than on the tutorial videos, and I was a little reluctant to do that before I had a chance to test it out myself. So that's something I would like to do very soon. So again, take a look at these videos, spend some time, really look at all of them, and then when take one of those videos and then do it. Do what they say. Do the quick start program. Plan a meeting, present in a meeting, and do that. When you do your 30-day 30-day account, you'll have access to two platforms, actually. One is called My Meetings, and one is called My Webinar. So they're a little bit different. I'm using webinars for trainings. I'll be talking more about meetings again at some point in time in the training here. But for the purposes of our discussion right now, we are talking about webinars. Now that we have created the basic shell for the 10 Copyright Commandments webinar, let's see what else we can do and what else we should do to build it out. Now again, everything that we've already done is fully customizable, and we can go and we can edit, but there are some session settings here, and there's a lot of stuff that is on here that is default that we want to work with. So let's go through them one at a time and see what changes we might make and why. The audio settings, again, are we talked about that being the VoIP or the long distance. My recommendation is leave this as is, or for both. But if you're uncomfortable, or if you are working with a clientele that's very uncomfortable about VoIP, or that really doesn't know how to use it, and you are going to be hearing more people, kvetching and complaining that they can't hear you, then you probably are better off, disabling that and just staying with long distance, with the telephone number. Okay, if you make any changes to anything, whether you're making changes here or anywhere, you always have an option to notify all of the affected participants of the changes. So if you've had people who have already signed into your platform and they've already received a note from GoToWebinar saying that they can log in and listen to you, using VoIP and telephone method, and you change that, then what you want to do is definitely send them another note back and notify everybody who has already registered that there has been a change. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, we're going back, is going to be panelists. So you can always add panelists later. You don't have to add the panelists at the time that you create the webinar. You can do this later on. So you may decide you want to have a webinar on a given day and then, collect some panelists later. Don't add their names before you've had a chance to speak with them, but you may have people attend after you have done that already. So what happens here is, again, I really suggest you contact them first and ask them, make sure the date is okay, and then of course you'll be having some discussions about their input, and that's going to be covered in the checklist. But in the meantime, what happens is you'll be putting their name here and their email address, and then they will appear actually on the program and on the holding page in the waiting area as panelists. So you can also resend the invitation emails. If you have panelists who are registered, you may want to do that. You may always want to remind people about a webinar. Let's see, branding and theme. Again, this is all stuff that you can change. You can change the logo. You can change the pictures. Presenters appear in the room here. You can add, of course, if you're the presenter, you want to have your name. You can add other presenters. You can have presenter images, and you can have up to 6 in that room at any point in time. Again, always remember to preview and spend some time with the preview. Making sure you've got everything done right. You can also have a welcome message. What I usually have as my welcome message is something that says, make yourself comfortable. I'll be with you shortly. Typically, I log into my webinars about 30 minutes before just to make sure everything is okay. Sometimes people arrive 15 minutes or so prior to the appointed hour. people who have known me and attended my webinars for years, and there were many of those folks know that is my that's my MO. And very, very often people will arrive early, so we have a chance to chat a little bit and catch up. So again, for future reference, if you're attending live webinars, I like to get there about 15 minutes ahead. It's a good idea to do that. It's a good idea to let people know they can come early. It gives you a chance to interact. It gives you a chance to engage. It gives you a chance to speak with people. It gives you a chance to check your audio to make sure that people can hear you. It gives you a chance to hear, what their background noise is like. If you have a small group, and and you can keep it interactive, and you don't have to mute everybody, that's kind of cool, because then you have a very, very interactive presentation. People can engage, and it becomes very, very personal. It's a lot of fun. It's really, really great. I think that's great. And again, 15 minutes before gives you a lot of opportunity to catch up and get to know people personally. Okay, we did that. We're email notifications. Okay, so let's go to email notifications now. And this is very neat. This is one of the neat things about GoToWebinar. Now, I'm going to mention a couple of things about email, because again, this is coming from their platform, and they have emails that are built in that are done for you. You've probably seen them a million times. You sign up for a webinar, and the first thing you get is an email saying, thanks for registering. And when the webinar is over, you get a webinar. We're going to talk about that, because those are all generated by the system. They're all, they're all different. There is some default text, and you can let the system, use the default text, or you can personalize it. And I highly recommend that you personalize it. The other question becomes, do you want to use their emails, or do you want to use your own from your own autoresponder? And again, that's a matter of choice. I like to use both. I'll be honest with you. I really, really like to use both. I like to use a combination. I let the GoToWebinar platform send stuff out. I make sure that it's personalized. And then, because I'm using a webinar bridge that you can see about in another one of the videos here, at the same time that people are registering for a webinar, I'm putting them into a campaign. Now, if they're already in a campaign, and if a subscriber is already on my mailing list and they register for a for a webinar, that's not necessary. Unless I'm doing another kind of campaign on another subject and the messaging is all very, very different, it's not necessary to do that all the time. When I created this webinar and I put the webinar in the platform, let me go over here for a second here, over to Blog Mother Fran. When I created the event at Blog Mother Fran, and also at HUD Homes Fever on the other site, I just put the registration link right here, and that's all that was necessary. So there was no bridge attached to that. That type of registration does not put you onto another mailing list or anything. And again, you created a link. It asks for your name and email address, and that becomes your private link to the event. Each participant in the event has a unique link. Everybody is logged in separately. You can't share the link with other people because it's your link. People have to register independently. You can share it, and depending upon how you set it up with the platform, a number of things can happen. If I have a webinar and I have, Davy Jones appearing as a registrant, and Davy Jones appears as a registrant 20 or 30 times, that tells me that somebody was sharing a link. That might be okay sometimes, and it might be okay on a free webinar. I mean, on a free webinar, I don't know why people wouldn't want to have their own anyway, because they will get, they'll get notifications and follow-ups and so forth and so on. But if I'm doing a paid webinar, or if I'm doing a webinar that's part of a program where people are paying a premium, and I see 20 attendees with the same name using the same link, I'm going to delete them, most of the time, because that's just not a cool thing to do. And And I don't see that happen a lot. I see it happen occasionally, but happily not too much. But that's something that for you to think about. Every time somebody registers on a GoToWebinar link, they are creating a ticket to the event for themselves in their name and for their email address. And all of these emails that are generated from the system are going to go to the email address that actually registered for the event. So let's take a look at these and let's see what your choices are and how to proceed, what the best way to go. So we have email. You have a choice of sending it in HTML or in plain text. The HTML, it seems to have very, very good delivery rates as far as I can tell. I just leave it at that. This says, it gives you a chance to preview the webinar invitation, and this is what it looks like. So when the invitation goes out, when they, this is the invitation to register for the webinar. So when I want to invite people, if I want to invite them from the platform, they get this and they have to actually click on the link or, on the button here or on the link to actually register. So there's an invitation to register, and that's not something I mess with a whole lot. Okay. You can also have it email you the invitation. You can personalize the emails, and here we go. And so here we have an email. The subject line is a confirmation with the webinar address. You see that? Okay, that's what that is. It allows 297, or I have 297 more allowed, so 384 max. So you can see that is a pretty big subject line already, and I don't really see any reason to make it any longer than that. Here's how it will read. Dear first name, whatever first name they use on the registration. Thank you for registering. It inserts the webinar link. It says, please do not share this with others. The link is unique to you. You will be connected using the computer's microphone and speakers. A headset is recommended. There we go. So because I registered here with this email address, that remains there. I can add other text here. I can change the email address. I may want to direct questions back to to Webinar Fever. Actually, I may want to create a separate email address that collects email germane to this project, and so that might be something I would consider doing, and I do that on occasion. I can add this to the calendar. Your people who receive this email will be able to add the event to their calendar, and then of course you can preview and see what that looks like. Now, you also have the ability to choose additional email and tell the system exactly when to say it. So here are the default times to send out emails to people you are inviting and also to registrants. So what they recommend is 1 week before, 1 day, and 1 hour before. And I think that's fair enough. I take it one step further again with my own autoresponder. And I will also, with my own autoresponder, send an additional one the day before, one an hour before, and I will also send one out about 5 minutes before. In addition, I may want to add an SMS text message so that on that person's phone, they get a message saying, you know what, the webinar is about to start. Check your email, log in. We're starting in a couple of minutes. I may want to do that. Of course, you can only do that if you have their text and their cell phone, and you have permission to do that. So if you have, in the course of your communication with your registrants, if you been able to secure that information, you can use that very effectively. The other way that is really, really excellent and that works wonderfully to increase attendance is a voicemail message. And by delivering a voicemail message to your registrants' phones just before the event is going to start. The other thing that you can do with your autoresponder system is something else, because with the autoresponder system over at Instant Customer, let me give you an example. When you're doing an event over there, and this is a little bit more germane to Evergreen webinars right now for when they sign up for the Evergreen, and they're working on a live webcast platform right now. You can actually design that system in such a way that if you have, let's say you have 100 people who have registered for your event and 50 of them show up, well, you can actually have that set up so that if you have a bank of registrants who have not, clicked the link and actually attended, that the system, you can prompt the system and say, okay, if anybody hasn't attended, 5 minutes after it starts, segment that group and send them a notice and tell them we're live, come on, don't miss it. And that is something else that has proven to really increase attendance a lot at webinars. And that, again, is using your own cross-channel marketing in conjunction with GoToWebinar in a way to make it more powerful than ever. So let's see, what do they say here? Yes, it says it suggests that you send the reminder at least twice. I agree wholeheartedly. You can also, change this. You can, you can change that even more. You can preview that email. That's a reminder. It's a reminder of the date and the time. And then afterward, when the event is over, you can send follow-up email. And again, this is something you can send. A lot of people send it out the next day, and some people send it out the next hour. Some people wait even longer than that. The default is 1 day. I think if they did attend, it doesn't matter if it's a day or an hour. What I do think is important is that you actually personalize it, because what they say here is, thank you for attending our webinar. We hope you enjoyed our event, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but you can add some stuff. You may be offering something in your webinar. You may be offering a special report. You may be offering access to a video. You may be offering a special list of, the list of all the foreclosures in the area. You may be offering a list of staging tips. You may be offering something really, really cool. And if you're offering something and you're promising to deliver that after the webinar, then you might want to make this an hour after, and make sure that you type this, write this in. Here is your list. List of, here we'll say list of bank properties. Bank properties. Boy, I'm a terrible typist, I'll tell you. As promised. Okay, and then what you do is you'll actually insert the link here. You may have that, I don't know where you have that stuff, your domain.com, bank list, PDF, whatever. Whatever it is you have, you can put the link in and put that link right in the follow-up email that goes out from GoToWebinar, and that's a really, really, really neat thing to do. And do that in advance. So plan that in advance. As we talked about, you're going to plan what your handouts are, plan what your bonuses are, plan what you're sharing. The other thing you may want to do, and which is a really great idea, is to give them a link to your website. Maybe a link to register for something else. Maybe you're doing an open house, whatever. You have an opportunity here to reach these people who you had talked to. All right. Now, what about the people who did not attend? What about the people who never showed up? Well, you don't want to send them the same thing, because here do we say thank you? Yeah, we're saying thank you for attending the webinar. So you're not going to say thank you for attending the webinar if they didn't attend. Let's see what GoToWebinar says in their personalization. They say, sorry you were not able to attend our webinar. Please send your questions, comments, and feedback to, and that's where they leave it. So that's where you can really, really capitalize when you record your webinar, when you offer, and you may want to say, don't fret. I recorded the webinar. Okay, you can see it, give the link, where people can find it. One of the things that you definitely want to do here with that kind of message is, is introduce some level of scarcity. If they know that it's there and they can see it anytime they want, then there's a real good possibility that they'll never go back. If you tell them it's only going to be posted for a week or only going to be posted for 48 or 72 hours, that's something else. And that increases, a whole measure of urgency. And if it's something that is really, really interesting to them, they're going to make a point of going and seeing it and watching the replay. If it's not interesting to them, and and they're really not interested, that's fine. Then maybe that it's not really, really good targeted traffic, and maybe that's really not a really, really good prospect for whatever niche it is you're working on. So don't worry about that, but definitely assign a time limit and follow up. Again, in the meantime, make sure you have everybody captured on a list that you own, because this is a GoToWebinar list, and this is not a list where an email company, an email autoresponder company, with a whole lot of integrity is going to let you just upload these contacts and start sending them stuff. If you have an email company that lets you do that, I'll be honest with you, I think that is something that's a red flag about the service you're using, because the stuff that the people that I'm using that just is not allowed. When people take advantage of a system like that, when they abuse a system like that, they create spam. And when you have a system that is responsible for creating a lot of spam, then that system starts to suffer terrible issues with deliverability and reliability of service. And if you are housing lots of people in a list on that, your own deliverability and your own email is going to suffer. So you want to be with you want to house your list, and you want to see it residing on a place where the managers and the people who operate that system are have the integrity not to do that. Let's go back to our webinar here for a second, see what else we have to work with. We just did the email settings. Polls. Okay, so we can, for some reason my poll disappeared. I probably didn't save it. You can create polls that you can conduct inside the course of your live webinar. There's single answer poll, multiple answer polls, and again, this is very, very simple. How many houses did you sell last year? Okay. This is going to be a single answer question. And we can say none. We can say 1 to 5. We can say 6 to 10. We can say 11 to 20, and obviously people are going to be doing much higher numbers than that. And then we can create the question, and then we can create several polls. And if you're going to have a webinar that's about an hour long, you might want to have 2 or 3 polls, and then space them out at about 20-minute intervals. What you're doing at that point in time is you are, just engaging them, making them click on something, making them think about something, connecting your webinar, your material to them, showing them how they compare with other people who are on the webinar, regardless of what the question is. And that's a very, very good engagement tool. And GoToWebinar does a great thing with that. In the meantime, anytime somebody answers a poll on your webinar, that answer, the answer to the poll, the answer to the surveys, or everything that they do in terms of engagement appears on an Excel spreadsheet. And when the event is over, you can download that spreadsheet and you will have access to that information. Same thing with the survey. Again, the survey is something that happens on the registration form. We talked about that already. And you can have different kinds of surveys. You can have multiple answers. You can have a scale of 1 to 5, short phrases and essays. So you can ask people, all kinds of questions. I answer surveys. Sometimes people are looking for information. What kind of surveys could you do on your registration form? You may want to be talking to investors. You may, ask people, have they owned investment properties? What are their questions about real estate investment properties that they would like you to answer on the webinar. You might want to ask, do you want me to contact you personally and give them an opportunity to respond to you in the survey form. Now, if you do that in the survey form, then you really need to be going back, because all of that information is available in a CSV form. Let me show you that for a second here. In a CSV form on the webinar, on a completed webinar. So I have, on this, I don't have one on this practice session. Sorry about that. And I don't, I'm really, really reluctant to pick one up and show you something for a live one I have, because I don't want to violate any privacy issues, and I don't want to show names, and I haven't gone through all of the, rigmarole of, uploading a sheet and, crossing out people's names so you can't see them. I just haven't done that. But you can take my word for it, because you can get reports. You go to generate reports over here. You can get a registration report and that's for everybody who registered. You get an attendee report afterwards and a performance report that gives you details of the entire webinar from start to finish, and shows you how engaged people were and everything else. So that's what you can do. Let's see, one more thing, and you may want to require a webinar password. If you require a webinar password, you've got to think about that yourself, and you have to send it to people from outside of the system, or they can't enter the webinar. So when you set up your webinar, they will ask you what you want the password to be, and then you have to use your other autoresponder to actually tell them what that password is. I've never used passwords. It could be something that you want to do and test a little bit and see if people have a problem. I'm just always reluctant to make things any more complicated than they have to be. It seems like even if you do things really, really simply, there is a some measure of attendees who are going to have problems with technology no matter how easy it is. And that's one of the reasons I haven't done this. If you're working with a group and you have a group that's really, really good, tech-savvy group that's cool with all this stuff, and you have reasons to be using passwords, then, be my guest, go for it, and come back and talk to us about it somewhere in one of our forums, and let us know, why you did that, how it worked out, and let's hear about that. Okay, so on to the next one.